Hello everyone. This one might be a little bit long. Got a few things I need to fit in, but bear with me. It should be a good one. Okay. So hello everyone and welcome back to my channel Through the Pages with Dee. So we're going to start off with reviewing the last of the books that I've read in April. So firstly, the book I've read was Gog Magog. We can't even see that. We'll put it up on the screen. It'll be either here or here, one of the two. By Jeff Noon and Steve Beard. It's interesting. If you are after fantasy, I don't think you're going to get more fantasy than this, to be quite honest. It really does go into some very different ideas, different structures, different fantasy elements. I found it very, very interesting. And as I say, very, very fantasy. Very fantasy. So just to explain, I'll just put that down there, a little bit about Gog Magog. So the main character is a lady called Katie, and she is a 78-year-old woman who was previously a sailor and a captain of the Juniper, the ship the Juniper. And for quite some time she used to do these voyages of goods and people back and forth on the river called Nisus. And this Nisus is quite a turbulent sort of hard waters to sail on. There are all different sorts of places you have to go past that have threats of their own, and because she's a very experienced sailor, she is the only one who can kind of direct the way through the Nisus. She also has a friend who is another character who we meet in this story called Yanish. Yanish is only young, he's only 18, but Katie and Yanish met each other because Katie saved Yanish when he was 13. She saved his life, and they've had a friendship ever since, and he's kind of one of her best friends throughout the book. We also meet another character called Fable. She runs a corner shop. She's kind of like a witch type character, and it's through these three at the beginning first chapter that we then go into the story. So it's through Katie speaking with Fable that she finds out that there's two people who are actually asking about her. They're making inquiries as to where Katie is, how can they find her, they need her services, etc. So Katie doesn't really want to be contacted. At this point, she's sold the Juniper on. She's done with the sailing escapade. She doesn't want to go on the Nisus anymore. She's getting old and she's not interested. But there is still that kind of adventurous side to her that wants the curiosity of what these people want. So eventually, then she goes to speak to Yanish, and Yanish also says that two people have been asking for you. However, I didn't know to tell them not to come and ask for you, so I've told them where you live. So she's a little bit disappointed in that, but she goes to find out anyway what the deal is. So then she meets these two characters. One is called Lek, and he's what's called a thrall. Now, a thrall is an artificial intelligence in the form of a robot, and it runs from a crystal, and it has like this glass facial structure where you can see the crystal glowing, and it's able to change its facial expressions to suit the mood of what it's trying to prevail. And then there's also this young girl with the thrall called Bryn. And Bryn is quite poorly, and it's easily seeable that she's not well and she's ill, and that she needs some description of some help. And Thrall is kind of her protector and looking after her. But these thralls have been eradicated. They've been just scrapped because they had an uprising and they caused a lot of deaths, and they're considered as a non-entity now. They're considered as a threat. So you don't really see many of them. They're usually all been scrapped. But this one's managed to survive in order to protect Bryn. And this is the beginning of the tale. And we go on this adventure. And it is absolutely 100% a fantasy ensuing adventure. You find out that Katie has a lot more to her as a character. Her arc is absolutely phenomenal as to from this, what just seems an initial appearance is that she's just this old sailor lady. But there's a lot more to her than that, and all to do with the earth and sort of Mother Nature, that kind of thing, and where she's actually from and who she actually is. Same with Yanish. Yanish has this symbol on his forehead, which is a triangle, and that resonates his mood, and it glows a different colour to sort of depict his mood. And there's all sorts of these different characters with different magical elements to them and where they come from and what they're about. And it's such a fascinating tale. You go on this superb adventure down the Nisus. She does actually agree to help Lek and Bryn, Lek being the Thrall, the robot. She does agree to help them. And she's slowly but surely getting this sense from Bryn of something extra. That Bryn is not just this child, there's something extra. There's also dragons within this book. Very heavily related to this book is the dragon element. The dragon is looked at as a superior being by some of these people, and it was slain in a war, and its ghost, which is called the Faina, now still exists. It's like a mist, and once it shows itself, it's kind of has warnings, or it's interpreted as a meaning by some of the different people within this realm. It's just such a beautiful tale, but with so much adventure. And I didn't think I'd find myself as being somebody who enjoyed anything to do with sort of nautical elements, but I really did. I really enjoyed Gog Magog. I would definitely give it a 4.5 hats out of 5. I don't think it's perfect, but it didn't elude a great deal of emotion from me, which is what I always look for in a good book, is the emotional tell more than anything. Does it emotionally affect me? And this didn't really do that, but it was one heck of an adventure. So if you are looking for ultimate pure fantasy, where there's so much magic in it, there's dragons, there's all these different types of beings that have all their own different elements of magic to them, I would absolutely say give Gog Magog a try. It's fantastic. So that's Gog Magog. Then I went on to watch Matt's recent review, Matt's Fantasy Book Review's recent review, and he was talking about Priest of Bones by Peter McLean. I have my copy here. I've had it for a while. I actually bought it off the back of Mike's book reviews, his review. I bought it off the back of that. And the way he described it, I thought, oh, that sounds like a bit of me, that. I'd like to give that a go. And then I watched Matt's review. And Matt was like, I had to give it a 2-star. I didn't think much to it. So off the back of some of my 2 favourite booktubers, I thought, okay, I've got time. I, as an in-between tuber between these two, so to speak, I'm going to read and review this book and see who my thought process leans more towards, whether it leans more towards Mike or whether I agree more towards Matt. So, as you can see the little pink post-it note there, I stopped and I DNF'd. I have not DNF'd a book in I don't know how long. I strongly agree with Matt. I really thought, when this book starts off with, you've got Thomas and his brother and the different groups of guys. They've come from the army. They've been fighting through a war. The war is now over. They're kind of at a loss, don't really know what to do with themselves, so they decide to go back home. But they've got clans. They've got their own type of warrior clans who don't necessarily rape and pillage, but have that kind of thought process. But that isn't Thomas's thought process. Thomas has become a priest. Hence the title Priest of Bones. Thomas has become a priest, and he has some kind of thought process towards that. But the further on I read, and I'm not going to talk about this one for too long because I was really disappointed, and this is the first book that's actually really disappointed me in a long time. It is so Peaky Blinders. It is actually ridiculous. It is actually ridiculous how Peaky Blinders this book is. I got that far in, so let's see, where did we get to? I got to chapter 11, so, I gave it a good go, 73 pages in chapter 11, and I just couldn't go anymore. I was so bored with the context of it's just Peaky Blinders. That's all that can be said for it. Thomas and his group and the people that he's got in his group, and his brother, whose name escapes me right now. That's how much of an impact it had on me. And it also had elements of the craze, and that's not what I was looking for. It's set in this particular period, and it just doesn't sound very much like this particular period. Yes, there are the elements of sort of the tankards and the beer and, you know, that kind of thing, and the dress and the surroundings, but it just, I'm very, very sorry, but no, I just didn't enjoy it at all, so I DNF'd it. In that context, with regards to, you know, Mike's review and Matt's review, I'm afraid I have to go with Matt. I just wasn't into it at all, so I've literally gone, nope, I can't do it anymore. It's just a ridiculous amount of Peaky Blinders. You can't help but read the conversations and read it in the Peaky Blinders sort of, I think it's Brummie accent, is it Birmingham? I just couldn't do it, so I'm going to put that one down. Then I went back to my old haunt of murder mysteries, kind of weird crime thriller type books. And I found this one in Waterstones. It's still got the buy one get one half price sticker on it, because I haven't yet removed that, so apologies. But this just seemed quite interesting to me, about a medium. Now, I quite like the idea of tarot cards, mediumship. I know it's been around for a very, very long time, and that kind of thing, hence my flaggy type things behind me. All that kind of mysticism really excites me. I quite like that. I used to have tarot cards. I used to do tarot card reading, so I do like that side of things. The witchcrafty kind of, that's very much a me thing. So I found this one, and I thought, do you know what? That sounds good to me. So it's about this lady called Mrs. Wood, who's a medium, and she has her sidekick, who is called Miss Newman, and Miss Newman and her together perform these grand seances, and they're very well known in London. They're with the aristocracy of London, and they perform these seances for the aristocracy. They're hoping to get to royalty, but at the moment they're at this aristocracy level with like lords and ladies. And then along comes this young girl, and Mrs. Wood keeps seeing her around and doesn't really know why she's sort of lingering around. And she's staring at her through windows, or she just turns up in random places watching, and Mrs. Wood's keeps seeing her and thinking, is this something to do with the other side? You know, is this some sort of message, a sign, something like that? And eventually she does mention her to Miss Newman. And Miss Newman also spots the young girl, and eventually they end up talking to her. And they find out that she's called Emmeline Finch. And that's when the story begins, really. So Mrs. Wood, then goes on to find out what Emmeline Finch wants and what she's hanging around for. And she wants to learn herself how to become a medium. So Miss Woods is not usually the type of person to do this. She's very much happy in her surroundings. She's kind of this well-known medium of the London world and doesn't really want to share those kind of things with anyone, and is very much enjoying the patronage she's being paid from this Aristotics, I don't know the word, kind of place where she is. She's got a very nice home. She was married to Mr. Wood. He's passed away. So she's very much a lady ahead of her time in a way, making an income for herself. And she has other friends in her circle. She holds these circle seances, and she have these other lady friends who perform the seances as well. They think they too have the gift, and they do this, say, once a month, and they gather. So she does agree eventually, thinking that it will bolster her, if that's the right word, her fame by teaching a protege. She will show this young girl to her patrons, and she may gain more custom from the back of that. And that's when it starts to take on a very, very interesting story. Now, what I also must say is that this book has been based on some elements of truth. Now, at the back, it does explain to you that there were two ladies in the 1800s, kind of more 1870s, who were in kind of battle with each other as far as mediumship goes. The lady who Mrs. Wood is based on was called Agnes Guppy Volkman, and the Emmeline Finch character was based on a lady called Miss Florence Cook. And there are some serious similarities, and I found that quite interesting because it is a very good read. Maybe this kind of thing isn't your cup of tea, but if it is, and you like something that's kind of cozy and a little bit different, it is kind of fantasy. It's not really there is an element of mystery to it, but it's not sort of a mystery murder. It's just a mystery as to who Emmeline Finch is, and are her intentions of a positive or negative nature. and you do find out exactly who Emmeline Finch is and whether or not she's there to do good for Mrs. Wood or do bad for Mrs. Wood. And I did find the tale very, very interesting. It consumed me. It took me a day and a half maybe to read. So that's when I know a book is good, is if I read it that quick. I'm consumed in the story. I don't want to stop reading. I take breaks, but I don't really want to stop. I want to find out what's going on. And yeah, there's a great cast of characters. They've all got some sort of personality of their own. There's a lady called Mrs. Hart, and she's quite a character. There's a dowageress, and she's quite a character as well. So yeah, I thought that Lucy Barker has done a fantastic job. It's very different. It's a little bit unique. I've not read a mystery quite like this. I believe this is her debut, and for a debut, it's fantastic. I thought it was absolutely superb. Really, really interesting. The ways that she goes into, I'll do a little tiny spoiler. The way that she goes into how mediumship works and the preparations behind that to actually give a successful performance. That's what I will say. I won't say that we're talking about necessarily directly speaking to spirit and that we're talking about that kind of story. It isn't that kind of story. It's the kind of story about successful mediumship and how, if you like, to get away with it. It's very interesting. You can tell it's kind of based on true events because it does ring very true. There's not this kind of leading you down a garden path to think that this lady does actually speak to spirits and sees ghosts. It's not that kind of story. It is very interesting. I know I keep saying the word interesting, but it is interesting as to how Lucy Barker has twisted the narrative and brought a very interesting spin onto mediumship and made it very real and very what you would imagine in that time it would have been like, and how they actually managed to do that. It's very what's the word I want? When you think of the logistics of pulling something like that off, it's fascinating for the time. I found it fascinating. When you're talking about sort of the period of like 1850 to 1870, to actually pull some of these things off, I found very, very exciting and interesting to read. So if that's something you're interested in, and I would say, just for something a bit different, maybe give it a try. It is very different, but it's very, very enjoyable. So that is The Other Side to Mrs. Woods by Lucy Barker. I thought it was great. If I was going to rate it, I'd probably give it a 3.5 hats. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's amazing, sort of, but for what it is, I thought it was really good. 3.5, 4. Let's say 4 hats. I'd give it, because it is actually quite an interesting read. I really enjoyed it. And then at the moment, I am currently reading this fantastic, different story. That's fantasy. Now, let me start here. If you are a huge fan of Neil Gaiman, okay, if anybody out there loves Neil Gaiman and you've potentially walked into your local bookstore and seen this title, but you love Neil Gaiman, I would say you have to pick this up. This book is called Perilous Times, and it's by Thomas D. Lee. And I picked it up yesterday, and I am, let me see, we're 280 pages in, and I only started this kind of yesterday tea time-ish. I've been reading it again today, this morning, and it is so good. What it is Neil Gaiman. Well, they say on the front, imagine Good Omens with Arthurian knights. So, quite literally. And I'm telling you about this now, even though I've not finished, because we're coming to the end of April. We're going to be hitting March, and I don't want to get myself behind with where I'm at. May is going to be a big month for me, so I'll talk about that in a sec. But, so if you've seen Good Omens already, or if you've read American Gods, which is the Neil Gaiman book I've read, I've got, what's it called downstairs? Forgetful Things, is it? Or Needful Things? I've got that downstairs to read, but that will come up at a different time. But I very much like Neil Gaiman's style, and this is so reflective of Neil Gaiman. He could have written this. I mean, maybe he has. Maybe Thomas D. Lee is an alias. I don't know. And that's no discredit to Thomas D. Lee. If you have actually wrote this, I think you've been heavily influenced by Neil Gaiman, and that's a good thing because it's really good, really good. So you start off with the awakening of some of the knights from the Round Table, as in Sir Kay, which in this story is told as Arthur's brother, and he's a man of colour, and which was accepted then in the days of the Round Table, but in the present day in the book, it's looked at as, oh, so there was a man of colour on the Round Table, and people a little bit kind of, oh, because, you know, that's quite a strange thing to think, because of how history's portrayed, that, you know, we had all the slavery and all that nonsense, that they would think that still relates to then, but obviously that wasn't a thing, that wasn't a thing back then. So this Sir Kay wakes up, and he wakes up from under a tree. Now, the reason why this happens is because back in the days of Arthur, things were kind of turning to shit, if you like, and Merlin came up with this resurrection stone, and he gave one to each of the knights who wanted potentially to keep England safe, and they swallowed this resurrection stone, and when they died in their specific designated areas, and when they died, a tree grew from them, and when England, or Britain, is in peril, they are resurrected, and they come back, and they fight to save England. And they fought in the World War, they fought against the Crusade, they've fought in every single historical event that has happened on British soil. And they've been doing this for centuries now. Centuries they keep coming back and having to fight again. So we're in a time of the future. It doesn't say specifically when, but it seems like we're in a time in the future where the ozone layer has gone to shit, the world has gone to shit, we're flooding because of the change in temperature and the ozone layer and the heat issues, and the world itself is, Britain in itself is flooding. Certain parts are inhospitable anymore, and people are running to different parts of the country, try and find shelter, and he comes across this character called Miriam. And it's a very weird chance meeting because where Kay's tree is right near this kind of oil sort of drainage plantation, and she's there part of Feta to get rid of anything that is destroying Earth. And he helps her break out, he helps her get out of this particular building, he helps her escape, he fights off what's called some of the soldiers in there, called Saxons. They're actually but he thinks Saxons to his time, so he thinks that he's fighting Saxons again. So he helps Miriam escape, and he meets her back near his tree. He tells her to get to this tree, and he meets her back near his tree, and then she presses this trigger, and the whole place blows up. And there's sort of an oil slick coming towards the tree, and that sets on fire by the explosion. Lots of men are taken, men are killed, and Miriam didn't expect that kind of explosion to happen, so she's kind of devastated now that she's actually potentially killed men, and she didn't want to, but she didn't think the explosion was going to be that big. So her and Kay are now sort of entwined within this tale, and he believes that she must be the reason why he's here. And she explains her story, how, you know, the things that are happening to the place, and how bad it's got. And so he thinks that, well, this is where I need to be then. This is the peril that I need to save, and this is the reason I'm here. So he goes along with Miriam. Then we jump over to the second POV of this story. So first POV is Kay. We jump then over to the second POV, which is Lancelot coming back. So he too comes from his own tree, which is somewhere near Manchester, near me. And as he comes out, there is someone waiting for him called Marlowe. And he works for this kind of secret service agency who know all about King Arthur. They're very much aware of the situation with the knights coming back and being resurrected. And they're there to sort of give them their new task. When they come back, they're there with documentation to say, this is what we want you to do. These are the guidelines. Here's some money. Here's some present day clothing, you know, that kind of thing. And so we're following both stories of Kay and Lancelot. And eventually, the idea is that at some point somewhere, they're obviously going to have to meet. There's also talks as to whether or not we're going to bring Arthur back, because Arthur isn't looked at by Kay or Lancelot as a very good man. He's not looked at like that. He's looked at what became as a destroyer, and historically it's not proven that it's good to have Arthur around. But the Marlowe and Lancelot tale is to try and bring Arthur back, whereas Kay, who's his brother, absolutely refuses to bring Arthur back. So it's very, very interesting dynamic. If you're into your history, there's a huge amount of history in this. It's very, very interesting. I love history, and it's absolutely laced with history. To be honest, whether it's, factual or not, I'm not sure, but it's still very interesting to the story. There's excellent dynamics between characters. There's these quirky fight scenes where Kay isn't fully understanding his new surroundings, and he's just like this good guy. He's just like this hero who wants to fight the bad and the evil in the world, and he just wants to save. And so that's a great dynamic in the story, where he meets these other people who are also protesting against certain things, and like immigrants, so they pick on this family of immigrants, and Kay stands up for the family. And then once he does what he does, the wife of the gentleman who's called for help is sort of angry then with Kay, because from his actions he's then potentially brought more trouble. And then the ladies of Feta are angry with Kay because he's brought this extra trouble. And it's just really interesting, and it goes from the reflections of Kay back to through his different ages of how it can relate to present day. I'm finding it really good. So I think this is going to be the book that I finish out April with. I don't think I'm going to have time for anything else. So this is why we're doing this now, because I don't think I'll have time for anything else. So if you're interested in that book, as I say, that is Perilous Times by Thomas D. Lee. And it's just amazing, as in Neil Gaiman meets Camelot. It's fantastic. I'm absolutely loving it. I think it's probably going to be somewhere near a five hats, something like that, I think, at a guess. So we're at the end of April, so I have to do my top 3. So sorry about that. There may be a cut there because I had to go and get my pad. I'd forgotten my pad, so sorry about that. Carrying on. My book of the month. This has been hard. I have read quite a few books in April. Let me see how many I've done. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I've managed actually to get in 13 books for April. I'm quite surprised at myself. A few of them have been novellas, so that does make the difference. But I do enjoy a novella. It breaks up the longevity of a novel. It just gives you a quick, short, sharp, interesting read sometimes. But 13 is what I've read in April. I'm quite impressed with myself that I've managed to get 13 books in. So let's go through what I've read first. So I started the month off in April with finishing off, because I started it in March. So I finished it off in April, Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. We all know how I felt about that book. I will link the video up here. You can check that out if you haven't seen it. I thoroughly enjoyed The Spear Cuts Through Water. It was Eva who put me onto that book. She raved about it, and she was not wrong for raving about it. It's such a visceral, emotional roller coaster ride of fantasy. It's beautiful. It's so stunningly written. Simon Jimenez is just an author that I will be checking out the rest of his works. I believe The Vanished Birds is the next one I need. I think that's the one he did first, but that's next on my list. He is just an outstanding author. It was so beautiful. So if you haven't heard of The Spear Cuts Through Water, if you haven't read it, I highly suggest that book. It's so good. So that was how I started April. Then I moved on to the beautiful Ida, who has watched a couple of my videos and reached out to me and asked me would I potentially read and review her book, The Artificial Structure Formerly Known as the Moon, which I did. It was one of my first real sci-fi reads. I have read some other sci-fis, but not quite as intense sci-fi as this is. It's a very dystopian world with some great characters in there, some great character arcs, and I think she's done a fantastic job. I really do. For an independent indie author, I think she's done amazing, and it's a great book. If you haven't read The Artificial Structure of the Moon, again, it's another one I strongly advise a read because it's great. Then I went on to Frolic of the Beast. These probably aren't actually in order of how I read them, but The Frolic of the Beast I was reading at the end of March, and I finished it off as well. It was okay. Just a dynamic of a three-way relationship, really, and it wasn't brilliant, but it was okay, and that's by Mishikima. Yukio Mishikima. It was okay. It wasn't really outstanding, and I wouldn't say it was a waste of time to read. It was okay. It was an okay book. Then I read the Dr. Harper book, I'm a Therapist and the School Shooter. Different, very different. Kind of very conversation led, very verbalized. Different topics of different patients. It's not real. I must stress that it's not real cases. I have googled and researched, and it's not actually a real psychologist who's letting out actual stories. So you can read it with that sort of element of not feeling guilty that these things have actually happened, even though we know they do happen in the world. But it's very different. It's I found it quite interesting. It's a different take. My daughter bought it for my birthday, and it's a different take on how you might look at these people. It gives a very fantastical sort of twist towards it. I enjoyed it. It was quite a good book. Then I read The Reluctant Fundamentalist by Mohsin Hamid. I never get that name quite right in my head, trying to say it. Mohsin Hamid. I enjoyed that. That was a very touching story, quite emotional. It goes through some dark paths of things that have happened, and it was quite interesting. It's not quite what I thought it was going to be, and I enjoyed that element that it's not what I thought it was going to be. So that was another good book. Then I read The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. That emotionally touched me. That was a very, very emotional book about Nazi Germany, and the tale of the book thief is to do with the girl who loves books, and she's slap bang in the middle of this Nazi Germany and meets a Jew in the process and builds a friendship with him, and the family try and help keep him safe and away from the Nazis, but something happens and he has to leave, and then she's worried as to whether or not he's okay, and it's just the whole tale of how that progresses and how those relationships are built, and her actual arc as a character from going from a child to a woman. And it was really emotional and really touching, and it had some beautiful parts to it, and I really did enjoy The Book Thief. That was a great read. Then I read, again, these aren't in order, How to Sell a Haunted House, which was a buddy read with Ida, who wrote The Artificial Structure Formerly Known as the Moon. We had a great time with that, the conversation back and forth. It's the first proper buddy read that I've done where I was able to actually communicate back and forth with someone, and I really enjoyed that. I would love to do more of those in the future. I don't know if I'm going to. It's just one of those where you reach out to people and they could be busy or whatever. I have time on my hands to do these kind of things, so it's easier for me. But I would love to do a buddy read in the future with somebody else, or even Ida again, because the conversation back and forth about where you're up to and what did you think of this bit and what did you think of that character and can you believe they just said that and where do you think that's going. I really enjoyed that, because I don't, as much as I speak to my daughter about books, I don't really have that understanding of what we're reading, and that made all the difference to this book. And I suppose maybe I gave the book more credit because of that factor, because I enjoyed it more because of that. But it's a quirky book. How to Sell a Haunted House. It's a little bit different. It's a horror. It's not what I would specifically call horror, but it has horror elements. Things to do with dolls and this house being haunted, and the main thing of the story was the family and what was going on with the family in this book, and the dynamics between brother and sister, and how for many years they've not spoken, and now through the loss of their parents, now they're back in communication, and because of these years of not speaking they don't really get along, and how they're going to work through that with everything that's coming at them and what they're going through, and are they going to come out of it better or are they going to come out of it worse. That dynamic was what kept the book going, and I think that's a Grady Hendrix thing. I think that's what he does, is he throws horror into realistic elements, and he does it well. It works well. So again, I quite enjoyed that book. Then I read Renia by Carl Forshaw. Fantastic, fantastic book. If you, again, have seen my review, and I have reviews for all these, so I will sort of pop them in here with a tab so you can check those out. Renia was amazing. Such a fantastic journey. And Renia, as a character, she goes through, again, I keep saying it, but she goes through a fantastic character arc. Everything that she learns about herself, what her actual point is in her life, what purpose she has from realising who her family is and what her background is and how she's kind of the one and this quest then. It was just superb. The characters are brilliant in it. There's all these side stories with all the other characters that then conglomerate into the main story, and it's just such a superb read. Carl Forshaw has done an amazing job with Renia. Luna Ruinham, Volume 1, Renia. If you haven't read it, check it out. And I do know, through speaking with Carl, that he is on to Volume 2, and I am very, very excited for that when it comes out. I can't wait. Also, to go back to Ida 2 is on her next project, and I have been blessed by Ida, very, very blessed, to be a beta reader, and I couldn't be more moved by that generosity. Yeah, I didn't think anything like that would happen, and there you go. It just goes to show that people out there are fantastic, authors out there are fantastic, so I'm very much looking forward to those two next movements and stories from these two authors, because they are sublime authors. Then I read the book that Evie sent to me, Pulling the Wings Off Angels, KJ Parker. I have to say, he may not be very popular in the circles of the book world, but if you actually give KJ Parker a go and you have somewhat of a sense of humour, you will love him. Tom Holt, with his pseudonym of KJ Parker, is a fantastic writer. He adds humour into his very sort of strong elements. Even though we're talking religion and God and the devil and things like that, he puts humour in there that makes them just such an enjoyable read. He is up there for me now with the likes of Stephen Erickson and John Gwynne. He's fantastic. I love his work. So I really enjoyed Pulling the Wings Off Angels. It's only a novella. I have started also 16 Ways to Protect a City, or something like that it's called. Without having it in front of me, I forget the title. But I have started reading that one too. And again, it's the same. It's the same writing. And I was kind of fearful that it wouldn't be, that he'd maybe take a different twist on his writing style. He writes the same humour's in there. It's fantastic. That's what is my favourite element about KJ Parker, is his writing style. It suits me. I love it. So I'm absolutely sold with anything KJ Parker now. So that was Pulling the Wings Off Angels. I read Gog Magog, which was brilliant, by Jeff Noon and Steve Beard. Great read. Very, very, very fantastical. Definitely out there with the aspects of the magic and who people are and where they're from. Then I moved on to The Other Side of Mrs. Woods. Great book. Very different take on a mystery, where we're talking, like I said, about mediumship and the background elements of performing as a medium and what is involved in that, and based on some reality between two ladies back in the 1800s and the little rivalry between them. And it was just great. It was just a nice, easy read, light-hearted, kind of cosy, but really interesting. And you could tell there was an element of reality to it, because it just read that way, like, this reads quite real. So that was good as well. Priest of Bones, which I DNF, so we don't really count that, because it was boring, it wasn't very good. And Perilous Times, Thomas D. Lee, which I haven't finished as yet, but I'm pretty certain it's going to be up there, because I'm already very, very much enjoying it. I think it's fantastic. I'm over halfway through and I'm loving it. And as I said, 16 Ways to Defend a City. I'm still reading that. That's the next KJ Parker that I'm on to. So I think by the starts of May I'll have these all done. But let's get to it, Dee. What are your top 3? I usually do a top 3 every month. This is a very, very hard month to do that. So I have to do a top 4, because if I don't, I am missing out something that I've really enjoyed. But who's at the top? Well, there can only be one, really. There can only be one. So we've got in fourth place, Pulling the Wings Off Angels by KJ Parker. It doesn't really feel right, me saying it's in fourth place, but you have to have a tier system and you have to put it somewhere. So I have to say that it's at 4, because it doesn't quite, with it being a novella, and it's a fantastic novella. If I was just rating novellas, it would probably be at the top. But because the others are novels, and that's the way my brain works, I have to put it at 4. So Pulling the Wings Off Angels is at 4. At 3 is Renia by Carl Forshaw. Also, The Artificial Structure of the Moon by Ida. 2 fantastic indie projects that are bipolar opposites from each other, but have such journeys and adventures and character arcs, and one's dystopian and the other one's very much fantasy, surrounded by an actual environment of books. Very different stories, but still both gave me the same feel of this wonderful new talent that's coming into the world, and how we need to encourage indie authors and support them and back them for them to give us more of their work, so that we get the pleasure of reading it. So they had to come in joint third, which is Renia and The Artificial Structure, formerly known as The Moon. I think they were fantastic and great work. And number 2, it's The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak, because it emotionally moved me, and it's got elements of reality to it, as in what happened in the time of Nazi Germany and the rule of Hitler and how people were treated. And it wasn't just necessarily about the foul treatment of the Jewish people. It was about also the treatment of the German people, and some of them didn't have it good either. You know, it wasn't just all one-sided in this particular dynamic. It was very much an overall horrible situation. And with this tale, with the book thief, the girl who is the book thief, the actual beauty that comes from her story and the connections and relationships that are made, and there's some serious heartache, but the beauty of it and the way it's written, it had to be at number 2. I was contemplating a joint 1 spot, but I just can't, purely for the absolute talent of who's at number 1. So, I say solo, don't I? I need to realise. I say so rather than because I think is quite a horrible thing to keep saying. So, okay, number 1. It has to be The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. Again, if you watch my review, you will know why. The beauty of this story just astounded me. It absolutely astounded me. I could not believe just how beautiful this tale was. Sorry, my computer's doing things. How beautiful this tale was, how beautifully written it was. I enjoyed the change in structure of a book rather than being set chapters. I love the difference of layout within this production of this book. It was just absolutely beautiful, and the fantastical elements in it, the eccentricity of it, the inclusion of animals within there and how they were used and portrayed, very sort of Sir Terry Pratchett, and it was just beautiful. It is just a beautifully, slightly sort of horrific tale of past meeting present, and this kind of loop in time, and how it keeps going back on itself, and can you do anything to change that, stop it, prevent it? It was just superb. So my book for April is The Spear Cuts Through Water. Now, with regards to May, what am I going to do in May? My TBR for May is MALAZAN, the entirety of May. I have Memories of Ice, but I bought it as a second-hand copy. So, unfortunately, some of the pages are actually falling out of it. So I don't think it's safe for me to actually read. And I don't really want to sellotape or do anything like that with these pages. So I am going to order on the last of this month, last day, tomorrow. I'm going to be ordering the next 4. So we're going back to Memories of Ice and the 3 following on after Memories of Ice. And I'm going to do those throughout May, but I'm going to do it in a vlog style. So around about, depending on the length of the chapters, it will either be after every 3, 4 or 5 chapters, depending on the length. I will potentially film my thoughts, and that is what I will be putting out over May. And I'm going to do it that way because I think then, because of what Malazan is, I get the opportunity then to share in a deeper sense what I'm thinking and feeling about these books, because they do have a lot of thought-provoking elements, and I think it just might be nice to see how it plays out for me doing it that way, and whether it's something that is successful or not, and we can only give it a try. So those are my plans for May. It is Malazan May. So all the Malazan people out there, if you want to come along and join this journey with me through the entirety of May, beginning with Memories of Ice, because I've read Gardens of the Moon, I've done Dead House Gates, I don't really want to go back. I do remember where I was up to with the whole fight with the House of Chains and how it ended and the hanging, etc. And I do remember all of that, so I've got my notes, so we're just following on. And I'm excited and nervous, I'm going to be honest. I'm a bit of both. It's kind of scary thinking that, you know, this is where you're committing all your time to, is just this one series. I haven't done this as yet. I did read the trilogy of the Farseer and the whole of John Gwyn's Faithful and the Fallen in one go, but they're a lot easier to read than Malazan, so I am a bit nervous, a bit scared. So if you are supporters of Malazan and you're out there and you could support me through this journey, I'd really appreciate that, because I don't want to feel alone in this. It's quite a daunting task. I don't know how far I'll get within the series, but the entirety of May is being committed to Malazan. So we'll see. If I have to pick up the rest of the books, I will do that. If I run out of reading material, I will continue and get the rest of the books. But so far I'm ordering 4. And I'll see, just because they are quite chunky books, so I'll see how far I get. I may need to take breaks in the middle and potentially throw in a novella just to give my brain a bit of a different take on something, but then again I may not, because it may throw me off, so I don't know. But Malazan May, that's what I've committed to, that's what I'm doing. And yeah, I just hope you'll be there for that journey, because it should be fun, should be interesting. There are a lot of Malazan lovers out there. I know Dr. Philip Chase is a huge Malazan lover, and so I just hope I don't let the side down with my thoughts on Malazan and how I perceive it. So yeah, that's what I'll be doing in May. So there we go, that's my April wrap up and what's coming up in May. So I hope you all enjoyed that. I hope some of the books I've mentioned you will give a chance to. If you do, let me know in the comments. Please just do, reach out in the comments. I love to speak to people about books. That's why I started my booktube channel, was to speak to other people in the community about books. It can be quite lonely at times just reading in solace on your own, so you do like to have people to speak to about books. And yeah, so I'd love to read comments and see what you think of my book of April. And as far as I'm aware, that's it. I don't really have much more to say, so let's look forward to May, shall we? And thank you, April, for the 14 books. It was a brilliant month, a fantastic journey. Thank you to all the independent authors out there who've sent me their works. If I haven't read your works yet, I will get around to it, don't worry. I know there is still one author who I haven't quite read, and his book's releasing in May, so his may be one of my respites in May. And other than that, I've been Dee. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Oh, and also I see you through the pages. Bye everyone. Have a good day. Bye.